Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com. Let me move on to one of a topic I know you know a lot about, Bill Gates. And, you know, it's so funny. I still live in the real world. I go out into comedy clubs all the time, and I have comedy friends. And they believe what they read in the New York Times. And I had dinner with the three comedians, and one of them said to me, and that he goes, I go, do you know anything about what you're talking about? He goes, I'm informed. I read 3 newspapers a day. And I was like, let me guess. The New York Times, Washington Post, and the Boston. Yes, that was them. And
so
I'm like,
you're less than informed.
So you're misinformed. That's that old Mark Twain joke, right? If you don't read, you're uninformed. If you do read, you're misinformed. And so I meet these people who still like my, and they're all nice people. They're all decent human beings, and I just can't believe that you can get past the age of 45 or 50 years old and not catch on that you're being 100% propagandized at. I mean, just the Iraq War, people completely memory hold it, and they went on to do Afghanistan for 20 years. The Afghan papers showed it that they lied about it for 20 years straight. The Libya, complete lie. Syria, the gas attacks, same thing. And now, but they all go right on board with Ukraine. It's like, at no point do they learn. So my hope, that's a long way to me say I was having lunch with my old roommate, and he was saying Bill Gates is a great guy. He's trying to solve malaria. He's bringing vaccines to poor people. And just tell people why that's not true.
This is after the Epstein thing.
This is after Epstein, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing what billions of dollars can do for your public image, isn't it? And so exactly as you say, I get why Zoomers who've never known Gates as anyone but this philanthropy god would maybe think of him in that context. But how could anyone who was there in the 90s think of Bill Gates as anything other than that evil, rascally tech monopolist who built his fortune and his empire on coming into the open source software movement and the relatively free flow of information that existed there, and literally penning this tone-deaf letter saying, I'm giving stuff away to you guys and you're just going to steal it. Why would I do that? Everything should be patented and controlled. And that was literally how he made his fortune. And of course, as we know, the United States v. Microsoft back in the day, the antitrust lawsuit, all of that. But suddenly, the turn of the millennium, suddenly he starts the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and now he's good guy Gates giving away his fortune. But, the strange thing is that in that first year of the scamdemic crisis, his net worth actually doubled. How does this happen? He keeps giving away money, but he keeps getting more and more. How does this possibly work? Anyway, there's a specific reason that people think of him specifically in that context and in that way. Is because in addition to the millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of personal PR that he has still directly financed, there's the untold tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in grants that his foundation has given to various media organizations to make sure that their coverage of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is favorable. The Guardian's global development website, NPR's global health coverage, BBC Media Action, the BBC itself, World Health coverage on ABC News, all have received grants from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which, by the way, are generally reporting on stories about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded research and work. So what conclusion do you think the average person sitting there and just consuming it as just, their usual gullible rube? Of course, this is a great guy doing great work. That they've been programmed to believe that. I mean,
I try to explain to him, I go, Bill Gates is a megalomaniac monopolist, and in fact, they had a saying of how they would. Now it's slipping my mind, but they would get into a market, then they would expand inside that market, and then they would crush that market. So they did that with Netscape, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, exactly right. And people can watch the actual deposition of him during the antitrust trial. That was just, it's just crazy to watch him as he's attempting to answer the question, or attempting to not answer the questions, where he's pretending not to understand basic words in the English language because he obviously knows he's been cornered and found out, but he just will not respond to it. But again, all of that's been memory hold.
For like minute, it's like the longest dead pause to a basic question. It's longer than Biden.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like the Bill Clinton, what's your definition of is? He was doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. So I think there are three concepts you need to understand Bill Gates, one of which, monopolist. I think that's absolutely part of his long-term game plan. That was what he did in the software business, and that's exactly what he's doing in his foundation philanthro capital work, which is about monopolizing global health. That's one of the main research areas and focus areas of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There's another core concept is software, computer programming, technology. That is the lens through which someone like Bill Gates will examine any problem, to the point where, for example, people might remember before they memory hold this and claimed it was a conspiracy theory, Moderna literally talked about re-engineering the software of life. You know, we can re-engineer the software of the human computer system, essentially, by tinkering with your RNA. Yay, what could go wrong? The third concept that people need to understand is technocracy. He is a technocrat. And if you go and look up the dictionary definition of that, it's just going to tell you, oh, that's just someone who believes that there should be a sort of a ruling class or a governing class that is made up of engineers and scientists and what have you. That's part of it. But no, if you look into the history of Technocracy Inc., which was this movement that started in the 1930s during the Great Depression, everyone's casting around for ideas. How do we get out of this crazy topsy-turvy economic situation? One of the people who came along was this charlatan, Howard Scott, who lied about his credentials and everything else, but somehow managed to worm his way into the basement of Columbia, despite not being a professor there, and set up shop there to start his technocracy movement, which was based around the idea of you're going to have to perfectly plan the economy top down. And of course, you need engineers and scientists to steward over it. They're going to be the technocrats who are going to rule the technate, is what he called North America.
What?
And what they're going to do is they're going to calculate perfectly, as scientists, rational scientists can, exactly the amount of energy that will be needed to create everything that we need in the economy. Because again, these scientists are going to know exactly what you need, how many toothbrushes to manufacture and everything else. And they're going to calculate that energy expenditure. Then they're going to take that and divide that, measure that energy in joules, and then divide that up and hand it out as energy credits. There won't be money anymore. You're going to get energy credits measured in joules. And as a member of the technate, as a good worker, productive worker, you're going to get these energy credits every month to spend into the economy. And then it'll perfectly balance inputs and outputs so that there will never be this crazy depression boom bust cycle ever again. Yay, wonderful. Except the small problem with that plan, it was total madness, complete lunacy back in the 1930s to imagine that they were going to be monitoring literally every transaction in the economy in real time and measuring and denominating everything in joules of energy. It was insane. But actually in 2024, it's like, kind of could do that now, actually. Why don't we have a system that's based on, maybe carbon credits? And you get your certain allotment of carbon credits and you get to have this much and no more, citizen, because you are now a member of the technate. And don't worry, the overlords, the technocrats are going to steward over this and make sure you have just enough of what you need. So when you start to combine those ideas, everything starts to make sense, because Gates is in all of these different unconnected areas. Like, why is Gates the largest single farmland owner in the United States, right?
Why does he sound like Morgan the Martian?
So that's what I wanted to actually get into that right now. So here, this is from a place called Land Report. It says he owns a total of 275,000 acres of farmland, and it says with almost 250,000 acres of highly productive farm ground spread out over 17 states, the co-founder of Microsoft ranks as the nation's largest private farmland owner. Why would a tech nerd want to be a farmer? Much of Gates' acreage was bought in huge trenches, including a group of farmland assets owned by the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board that was acquired in 2017, and the 2018 acquisition of the 100 Circles acreage in the Horsehaven Hills of eastern Washington. Those two purchases alone total an investment of more than $690 million in farmland assets. And here's all the places that Bill Gates owns farmland. Look at that. He owns 20,000 acres in Nebraska, Wyoming, 9,000 in Idaho, 16,000 in Washington, 4,500 in California, 25,000 in Arizona, just 1 acre in New Mexico. He wanted to get his feet wet.
Yeah, what is that 1 acre for?
69,000 in Louisiana, Arkansas, Illinois at 17,000. It's Ohio, Wisconsin. I mean, even Florida, North Carolina. So, and here's just a quick little couple of paragraphs from Investigate Midwest. Spilling Bill's beans. Tech billionaire spent $113 million on Nebraska farmland. And Bill Gates' Nebraska neighbors, they don't know that he owns the soybean field down the road. Here's the story. Gates' farmland is held by more than 20 shell companies. Why would he want to do it through shell companies? Some lead back to a P.O. box in Kirkland, Washington, the city where Cascade Asset Management, which manages all Gates' investments, is headquartered. These limited liability companies buried under layers of business names, overlapping employees, and addresses in at least 3 states form a network more tangled and opaque than one created by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is buying a giant amount of Nebraska ranch land. Because it's hidden, Nebraskans living and farming in communities where Gates is among the largest landowners are often unaware that one of the world's richest men owns the cornfield down the road. Why? Now, James, tell us, why is he doing this, and why is he doing it so secretively?
Because he's a monopolist and a software engineer who's thinking in those terms. So in order to start to understand this, you have to understand all of the different investments that he has in all of the different parts of the global food supply and the food supply chain, that including, of course, his early investments in Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods and all of that, where he is very much on board with, well, we have to get rid of this stupid old system of, raising cattle and slaughtering. No. What we need is lab engineered meat substitute gunk. What could go wrong with that? We're going to engineer our meat in a lab and it'll be good for you guys. Why would he be so interested in that? Well, first, it's a technological solution to the problem, which kind of fits to a T, doesn't it? But secondly, it's because it allows more control of a few companies to literally control the global food supply. If you can get people weaned off of actual real food, including not only cattle and what have you, but how about plants growing in the ground? The oldest form of human activity, agriculture, and growing things from the abundance of nature. If we could somehow convince people that that's some outdated, who needs that? What we need is a few companies to control these labs that are going to engineer your food substitute gunk. So he has big investments in that. He also has big investments in a lot of different aspects of the seed cartel that has morphed over the decades. People might remember way back in the day, they talked about the ABC, Seed Cartel, Archer, Midlands, and whatever the other B and C were. But there's a handful of corporations that have controlled the global food supply of seeds for a long time. But now that's evolving in these weird ways. There's things called like the Crop Trust, which sounds like a wonderful thing. And one of their big projects is this Svalbard seed vault that is like something out of a James Bond movie. You have to look this up to actually see it. It's carved out of the side of a mountain up in the Arctic tundra in the permafrost. And they're storing seeds in there, just in case some sort of catastrophic thing happens and, I don't know, the entire global food supply is gone. They'll have these heirloom seeds stored in a fail-safe way.
Like Noah's Ark.
That's the plan. But what kind of catastrophe could they possibly be planning for? I don't know. How about some sort of genetic modified monstrosity being released out into the ecosystem and just going rampant? And hey, we don't have any food anymore. Oh, don't worry. We've got it in our Svalbard seed vault. And who is, I think, I stand to be corrected on this, but I believe the single largest non-governmental investor in the Crop Trust is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yes, it is. That's correct. Yes. That's how I first heard about that seed vault, where they're talking about Bill Gates owning all the seeds.
There's the African Green Revolution Alliance or something like that, AGRA, that again was partnered. Bill and Melinda Gates and the Rockefeller Foundation were partnered in. Hey guys, we're going to spread our love to Africa. Don't worry, guys. We're going to totally revolutionize your stupid, dumb, old farming practices. We're going to give you all the new whiz bang technology and make sure you guys are. And after 20 years of that, a bunch of African NGOs and active farmers and activist groups got together and said, please stop destroying our continent. Your stupid mechanized input intensive chemical farming processes are destroying Africa and we don't want you anymore. But they're continuing pressing ahead with that. There's so many other aspects of this. I just found out about one called, I think it's called DivSeq, which again, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation heavily invested in, that is collecting the genetic sequence material of all of these different seeds and patenting them so that they can then spread the love through their corporate oligopoly to all of the different corners of the planet. Don't worry, guys, we'll take care of the food supply. You just have to put all the control in us. And that is the kind of the bigger picture of this farmland question.
Yes, so that seems super scary, especially when Bill Gates is basically the guy who runs the WHO. And I don't know how engaged he is with the WEF. He is, though, right?
He's certainly spoken there and been promoted there. He's a frequent attendee of Davos, yes.
So when I see him say this about farming, I know he's up to no good. Here, I'm going to play it.
We really owe it to the poor farmers to give them better tools. My awareness of climate change really came when I was visiting Africa and seeing that as the crops failed there more and more because of the temperature increase, that was leading to malnutrition. And of course, when malnutrition goes up, that increases deaths. It means that kids are not able to develop either physically or mentally. There's reasons to believe that by using the latest techniques of being able to sequence genes, using AI, using satellite data, that for all the crops, not just the main cereal crops, we can make them far more productive and far more climate resilient. They'll be able to improve the lives of over 500 million farmers. And so, this is a very fundamental, top of the list thing to address climate adaptation. Of course, we don't just want these improvements to be in the lab. We want them to scale up. We're impatient to see this done. Prioritizing the highest impact interventions like we do in health will be very important. But I think we'll look back on today as a real milestone towards accelerating this adaptation innovation.
So that puts a chill down my spine when I hear him say that stuff. It's like, oh, we're going to help 500 million farmers. You mean you're going to control 500 million? That's what I hear. What do you hear, James?
I hear the exact same thing, and I come at this from the perspective of having studied this for a long time and seen that the Green Revolution from the 1960s, 1950s and 1960s, that was Rockefeller funded idea that if you read the history books about it, it was this wonderful revolution in technology for farming that has increased abundance and supply all over the world. And it's a wonderful thing that happened and has fed billions of people. But the real story paints a very different picture. And I've written about this, I've talked about it before, but basically, long story short, it was the invention of the agribusiness model. So you had, for example, the Rockefeller family, which of course made its fortune from oil, coming in and proposing all of this technology for food production, which would of course have a lot of oil inputs, as well as chemical inputs, which, by the way, the Standard Oil oligopoly also had its tentacles into. And that was spread around the world by the largesse, of course, of the US government, largely. Eisenhower had, it wasn't Atoms for Peace. I can't remember what the name of the program was, Food for Peace or whatever wonderful idea they had. But basically their idea is, okay, we'll subsidize all of these different countries to buy this machinery and implementation of technology and chemical inputs, and we'll help subsidize that for the benefit of course, largely the American corporations that are selling this around the world, and we'll get them hooked on all of these chemical inputs, etc. And then, play that out a few decades, and you start getting things like the Indian farmer suicides and other such things, as people get locked into these contracts where they're beholden to companies. They have unpayable amounts of debt. They end up killing themselves as a result. And that's in fact increasingly playing out in America right now. Farmers in America have a 3.5 times greater than the national average suicide rate because they get themselves locked into these massive debt programs for subsidizing them. Almost no farmers can actually own their tractors and their technology anymore. They lease them, and they have to, of course, purchase the contracts for the seeds and all of this from Monsanto or Bayer Santo or whatever it's calling themselves these days. And they get themselves locked into millions of dollars of debt that gets up completely unpayable and end up killing themselves. It's a tragedy, but it is the inevitable result of this centralization of power in the hands of few and few monopolists, corporate oligopolists who basically have cornered the global food supply. And that is the vision of someone like Gates. And when they're talking about then taking that down to the genomic level, and don't worry, guys, we're going to start patenting all these genetic sequences of all of these plants in order to find the best varieties and help the poor, grow these wonderful life-saving crops. I'm going to take that with a gigantic grain of salt.
So it is not a stretch to say that that Bill Gates is a bit of a psychopath, and that he is the old idea from the Bond movies. He is Dr. Evil. He wants to control the world health. He wants to control the world food. He wants to control the world, technology. Is he getting? He must be getting into central banking digital currency somehow. Yes,
he is. So if people really want the deep dive, I did a 2-hour documentary called "Who is Bill Gates?" CorbettReport.com/Gates. And in that documentary, I go through all of that and all the way these different parts of this disparate picture connect, including Gates's heavy promotion of digital ID, of course, and how that leads into digital currency. And he's talked about both at length. In fact, he was the foundation was involved in the creation of the Indian Aadhaar system, which is this the largest biometric system on Earth, where 1 billion Indians have scanned their fingerprints and their irises in order to get registered with the government and get this 12-digit number that they can then use to access government service. See, it's all about banking the unbanked and providing for people who need to access government services. How could we possibly do this without this complicated technological setup? And then, oh, by the way, there's been all of these data leaks with Aadhaar and everyone's iris scans and everything being widely available online. It's insanity. And it doesn't make sense from any perspective other than the perspective of someone who wants to monopolize and control literally everything, really, when you think about it, down to the genomic level. And that, unfortunately, this is one of the richest people on the planet, or at least what they tell people about I'm sure the richest people on the planet are not on the Forbes rich list. But anyway, one of the front men, at any rate, for this agenda of consolidation of control.
Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com.